Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I want to dive into transitioning from fat loss recomp to building recomp and what that looks like, and really how that's probably the most important phase and journey, the most important phase in your journey to manage, and where most people get stuck. If you want to learn more about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, 10 things you need for body recomp, two types of body recomp. So again, fat loss and building recomp, what that looks like, what you need to do in those phases, importance of managing your body comp, why that's important versus just focusing on your scale weight. Then that free resources for you, the link to that is in the show notes. And then second, so talking about transitioning from fat loss recomp to building recomp, inside my upcoming course that I'm hoping to launch sometime in the fall, I'm going to go through each phase, right, in depth in terms of what it looks like to have a year's worth of both fat loss and building recomp, how to make these transitions, what to do in each phase, what you need to focus on from a training perspective. I'm going to dive into that and much more in my upcoming course. So if you're interested in that and you want to get first access plus a discount, then I'm going to post a link in the show notes there for you to get on the wait list there for that. So definitely go and check that out. All right. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. As I said, transitioning from fat loss recomp to building recomp, probably the most important phase in your journey and the one that most people get wrong and they end up getting themselves stuck here. So this phase is going to make or break your long-term results. And a lot of people screw this up. They get stuck. They end up getting stuck in no man's land. So it's, I don't want to gain any weight. Every time I get out of a fat loss phase, I gain some weight. And so they get stuck in this no man's land of, I'm not eating enough, but I want to keep changing my body, but I can't lose weight either. So you get stuck and you eventually get to the point to where maybe like you end up just giving up and then now a bunch of weight comes back on and then you need to do this over, right? So that's that kind of vicious cycle that I see people get in. Or maybe you are going to be someone who's always going to be focused on your training and nutrition. Like now you're going to stay at artificially low maintenance calories. So now, you're at this artificially low maintenance calories where you're not going to be fueling yourself enough. And so you're not really going to see the adaptation that you want. And you're going to get stuck in this where, again, you're like, I don't really know where I need to go here. Or again, if you are someone who you do these things and then you do gain weight because you're not managing this phase right, now you start thinking diets don't work. I'm either on or off. But again, we need to nail this period of time. The real issue is poor strategy, execution, mindset, or just general education around this phase and what's going on there. So what actually happens when you increase calories post-diet? So we dieted, we got to where we wanted. If you listen to my episode on Monday, I talked about how to know to end a cut. Notes, let's say you're done. Like you need to end a cut. And now it's like, all right, where do I go from here? We can't stay at these calories forever, but we probably don't just want to be like, you know what? I'm done with the fat loss phase, so I'm just going to do whatever. We probably want to have some structure to get us closer to our maintenance so you have an idea, or maybe you're going to continue to track. Again, there's many different ways that we can go about this. In the course I teach, like we have other goals that we can have in a fat building phase. It doesn't necessarily just have to be gaining weight and building muscle. So again, whatever reason you decide that whatever you want to focus on outside of your fat loss phase, that's going to really impact where we end up getting to with this. But again, generally speaking, we need to increase our calories here. So what happens when you do that though? You're going to have more glycogen. So glycogen is a storage form of carbohydrates and it's considered lean body mass and it's a good thing. We want glycogen storage filled because that's going to be better for training. You're going to look for, but not necessarily like in a bad way either. So that's one thing that increases. And with that, you're going to see an increase in water weight, more food volume in the gut. If you're eating more food, you're eating more calories, you're just going to have more food in your gut. So that's going to cause some increase in weight. And you may have a little bit more fluid and sodium retention for some of the reasons I just mentioned, but obviously you're eating more food, so you have more sodium. So again, you end your cut at say 150, you may increase calories close to maintenance and you may be at 152 by the next week, but that doesn't mean you gain 2 pounds. And it doesn't sound like much, but that's enough for some people to be like, oh my gosh, I gained a bunch of weight. I can't manage this phase. I need to go back to fat loss to get down to 150. And that's the cycle that people get in. Now, I'm saying this, the scale may go up slightly. So if let's say you're at 150, you may see it go up a bit when you do this. You may see it stay the same, or you may even see it go down. I've seen that happen too, where people increase their calories, and because they've been so under recovered from pushing fat loss and getting to a certain weight and being low calorie for a while, that they increase their calories and their scale weight trends down because they just lost like a ton of just stress off the body there. So I've seen that too, where it may even go down there. So that's what we can expect in the first couple of weeks of changing our calories, or even in the short term in terms of days as well too. But let me make this straight. Short-term weight gain does not equal fat gain. And this is where most people panic. But what you don't want to do is keep calories too low out of fear. And that's, again, where people get stuck spinning their wheels. So here's some things that we can do in this phase. We want to keep our structure tight. So just because we're increasing our calories doesn't mean structure goes out the window. This probably isn't the time to just now, again, give up on what you've been doing and completely change things. Like keep your meal timing very similar. So if you're doing 4 meals during fat loss, probably keep it at 4. and just increase the types of foods that you were eating already. So again, stick with familiar food choices. Maybe you start to add in some other type of food that you didn't necessarily have during fat loss phase, but we really want to be careful with increasing a lot of our calories through overly processed, hyper-palatable foods, especially early on, because again, we're going to be at a higher risk of over-consuming these, and it's going to be harder to manage these types of foods in this state. So we need to be careful with incorporating these. If you were doing, say, like a 90-10 approach where 90% of your food was diet food, maybe 10% was less, or let's say you did 100% and zero, you probably don't want to go from that to, say, 60% if we were to look at your entire diet. It's, again, easier. That's not, this isn't a scientific thing. It's just like generally speaking, okay, yeah, when I look at my food choices, if we were to look at your food log, it's okay, 60% of that is whole foods, 40% of it is more processed type food, highly processed type foods. We probably don't want to make that big of a change. Maybe it's going from 90-10 to 80-20. Maybe it's going from 100-0 to 90-10, right? Like you're making these small changes on there with that. But again, we want to be careful with just starting, oh, hey, fat loss is over. Now I'm going to add in a ton of calories or tasty foods. We want to be super mindful of food rewards. So everything's going to taste better post diet, especially, again, these calorie dense type foods. So it's going to be easy to overeat. So we can't let that catch us off guard. We have to understand that this is going to be the case. So this comes back to just because you're done with fat loss, it doesn't necessarily mean we can flip that switch entirely from fat loss mode to not fat loss mode at all. This is an extension of the fat loss phase, but with more calories. But we still have to be smart with what we're doing. Because again, if we eat more of these types of foods, we just have to understand it's going to be harder to moderate our caloric intake. And that's where people get themselves into trouble. It's like, oh my gosh, my hunger is just so crazy after eat everything in sight. And you look and it's like, you're just trying to fit in too many tasty foods right now. Like you're like, you can do it, you can make it work, but it's just going to be harder. And again, so now if we can combine this with the fact that you're like out of the fat loss mindset and you're already at a higher state of wanting these types of foods that you're having, it's going to be harder to moderate. This is that recipe for you're just going to overconsume calories and you're going to put on more weight than you want, even though you don't really feel like you're eating a ton on there. So again, what do we want to focus on during this transition to help us with some of these things? We need to continue up with our daily movement and conditioning. So keep doing your cardio, keep up with daily movement. If you were doing 10,000 steps in your fat loss phase, maybe you drop it down by a little bit, but try and keep it relatively similar when you're making this adjustment. Keep lifting weights. And this is the other big thing where it's like, if you gain a little bit of weight while you're lifting weights, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. But again, if we're not lifting and you start to gain weight, it's okay. You're probably not gaining muscle. That's probably more fat gain than anything. Let's keep our protein high. That's going to help with satiety. That's going to increase your thermic effect of food, and it's going to help with lean body mass. And it's going to be hard to overconsume calories with that. Plus, with the fact that you are now closer to maintenance, your body may ramp up NEAT. And could also be why some people's weight trends down, is because again, now their body's more wasteful with energy essentially. And you combine that with high protein, and you could be seeing an uptick in your energy expenditure, right? So as we'll talk about, you'll need to monitor where weight's trending and to make potential adjustments there of you may need to increase your calories to get to maintenance at this point, right? Because what you may see happen is, let's say theoretically someone's total daily energy expenditure was 2,000 in a fat loss phase, right? They were eating 1,750 calories. They were at a 250 calorie deficit. Again, it's never that clean, just for simplicity's sake, so you can understand what's going on. Somebody may increase their calories to 2,000, and now their total daily energy expenditure is 2,100 or something like that. So you could see that. So then now it's like they still have that 100-calorie deficit. So now they need to increase calories more. How would you know? You'd have to look at scale weight to see where that's trending over time. It's subjective. You could also go off of subjective feelings as well too. But we want to continue to manage sleep and stress management. We want to look at your energy, your mood, digestion, and not just the scale. Like how are those things improving as well too there? So how do we approach our calorie increase? You don't need to reverse diet for months, okay? You don't need to have this, oh, I'm going to add 10 calories each week, and that's going to help me offset. Okay, don't need to do that. But we don't necessarily need to go crazy either. I think you could start with 150 to 300 calories above your fat loss intake. So let's take 2,000. Let's say your total daily energy expenditure is 2,000. You're eating 1,750 in your fat loss phase. Maybe that person we go to 2,000 calories, right? Again, it would be hard to know like what your total daily energy expenditure is. You wouldn't know for sure, but just again, for theoretical purposes, let's think about it from that standpoint. So start by adding in 150, 300 calories above fat loss intake. Go from there, track your weekly weight averages and track your biofeedback. How are you feeling? Is hunger starting to go down? If it's not, but if it's super high and your body weight's still trending down, hey, you probably need to add more calories. If you add 300 calories and now weight went up a little bit, but then it starts to stabilize, good, you're where you need to be for now. And then you have that option to what is the goal in your building phase. But again, you at least nailed on that phase. So we want to we want to track our biofeedback, how we're feeling, but we also want to look at our weekly weight averages. And then we want to prioritize carbs around training too. So if you're going to start to add in carbs, I would do that around your training. You're just going to utilize those carbs much better there. So I would try and, if I'm going to increase calories, I would do it closer around workouts. But just because you didn't maintain your lowest scale weight doesn't mean you failed. As I said, maybe you ended at 150, but once we get done with this phase, you're closer to 152 now. That doesn't mean you gained 2 pounds of fat. Maybe you needed to gain a little bit of body fat because you were super lean. But even if you're, say, at 152, it's like that doesn't mean you failed your fat loss phase, right? You're building now. So that means better recovery, better performance, more muscle, better long-term results there versus you end at 150 and you see it go up to 152. So now you're like, screw it. Or you go back down to 150 to maintain 150. And then you're like, this sucks. I can't maintain this like level of rigidness to maintain 150, and then you go off and now you're at 170, right? Like you see that happen. Whereas if we can stay with it, and yeah, maybe we get closer to 152 to 155, but you likely, if you did the things you needed to do, it's probably mostly lean body mass, maybe a tiny bit of body fat. Now you're at that body weight. Now you can push, you have better recovery, you can push performance, you can build more muscle, and then now you're starting your next fat loss phase at 155-ish, between 155 and 160, and then it's a lot easier to get down to 150, and you can maybe push past that to 145. So again, that's how we would nail this phase in between. And then from there, now you have so many options in terms of what you can do. But again, this is probably the most important part of someone's long-term journey is nailing this phase, like that transition out of fat loss into building. So hopefully this was helpful. If you guys found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. And then if you have any questions on this particular topic or anything like that, make sure you follow me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active. Talk to you guys soon.